911 operators of Reddit, what's the worst / saddest call you got? Not an emergency service operator, but I worked for the retention department for a major cell phone company years ago. I got a call from this middle-aged sounding lady who told me she wanted to cancel her line entirely. For my job, I asked her why she wants to cancel to try to offer solutions, or to straight up bribe her into not canceling. And she said I'm dying soon, and I won't need my cell phone in hospice. I had to reach out to my supervisor to get approval to cancel the line for account holder death, and he told me I had to warn her that she'd never be able to open another line with the company. She said that doesn't really matter anymore. I felt awful saying it and told her I was so sorry she was going through it. She started sobbing and said me too. I don't want to die. I still remember how her voice was shuddering when she said it. It really broke my heart. We started talking while I was waiting for the supervisor to do his override. She talked about how she was trying to deal with loose ends as best as she could to make it easier on her daughter who had just had a baby. About how she was worried about her dog not adjusting as he was a senior dog and he'd been with her since he was a puppy. She said she hoped it didn't hurt too much before she went. I let her talk until she didn't have anything else to say, and she thanked me at the end and said she was sorry if she burdened me. I told her it was okay, she deserved to be heard, and we said goodbye. I cried in the bathroom for about 20 minutes after we hung up. Aside from the stuff others already listed, like the CPR calls or being the last person someone talks to, which personally don't bother me much, there are some that have just stuck with me for various reasons. One was a call from a guy who had just shot his brother moments before the call. From what he said, his brother had some mental issues, and during an argument the brother snapped and started attacking the caller with a knife. The caller, not wanting to die, shot him in self-defense. What struck me in particular was the caller's tone of voice on the call. It's not something I feel like I can properly describe in words, but it was something like complete and utter despair for the whole situation. He truly did not want to kill his brother. Another was from an elderly caller that sounded a bit confused and nervous. She said she had been driving for 12+ hours to get to a meeting at a conference center, but needed help with directions for the last bit to find it. The conference center name wasn't ringing a bell for me, and after some digging I found out that it was a couple states over. After it clicked, and I realized she thinks she's in a different state, I made the mistake of telling her what state she's actually in, and that was the last bit of actual conversation we had. Everything past that was complete pure hysterics. I guess she must have realized how much her mind was starting to fail her, and just couldn't deal with it. With other hysterical callers, I've always been able to calm them down or at least get a few words out of them here and there, but there was absolutely nothing I could do for this lady. On top of that, she was in the middle of bumfuck nowhere in the farmland part of the county, so a police response would take a long time on top of the lack of a specific location for her better than where the phone was hitting. Fortunately, some random passerby was a hero. Despite it being the middle of the night, he stopped, checked on her, and even took the phone from her to see who she was talking to. He gave me all the info I needed, and even kept her company until the officers arrived. So while I can still remember the abject terror in her voice as she realized her mind was starting to fail her, it also restored a bit of my faith in humanity at the same time. My aunt used to be a 911 operator in a small town. She said the worst was a call that she didn't get. She worked night shift with one other woman and two calls came in at once. One was a car accident and the one on my aunt's line was a woman complaining that her street wasn't plowed. She talked to her for a while to calm her down, but in the meantime, a third call was missed. It had been a teenage girl calling because her stepfather was beating up her mother. She disconnected before my aunt could switch lines. Back then, there was no voicemail, but she called back, and a man answered, saying she called by mistake. The stepfather ended up shooting the mother and her two kids. But the kicker is that it wasn't until hours after the call. So there would have been time for police to get there if she'd been able to answer the call. She's also not sure if a follow-up call was what set him off. I was only an operator for a few months. The one I think about most frequently was a homeless man who called saying someone had shot his dog while he was away. He mentioned how that dog was his best friend. What sucked the most about this call, from my end, was that we were getting tons of other calls while I was talking to him. I wanted to listen to him to help him grieve, but I had to wrap the call up quickly so I could continue answering calls. That hurt me. Not an operator, but a first responder. One of the things that I hear our operators have a hard time with is zero follow-up. Once we get on scene they hang up and hope for the best. Did they make it? Did family know? How bad was it? Sometimes it can be worse than actually being there. The what ifs can wreck your psyche. A friend of mine was a 911 operator. She had gotten a call from a guy on Valentine's Day last year because his wife had hung herself. Poor dude was so distraught she almost couldn't understand him through the tears. Wherever he is, I hope he gets a hug today. I just quit in January, but I was a 911 operator for 6.5 years. The call that sticks out as the worst is a murder that was actively happening. A son in his 40s was drunk and stabbed his mother, who was in her 60s, to death while her husband dialed 911. You could hear the grunting and the mother and father begging us to hurry, and the just screaming. When police arrived the mother was dead, and the father was still trying to pull the son off of his mother. Total response time was around 4 minutes. Son was sentenced to 40 years. My wife used to be a dispatcher, and she had 2 calls that really stuck with her. 1. A drunk man drove his car into a pond and could not get out of the vehicle. He seemed too drunk to be able to follow her instructions and she ended up staying on the phone with him long enough to hear him taking his last gasps of air. It took the police department 2 days to find his vehicle based off triangulation. 2. A call came in from a woman that said her ex-husband was banging on the front door with the intention of killing her. She said that she first had called her parents to let them know before calling the police. My wife listened to this man get into the home and murder her. He went on to drive to her parents' house with the intention of killing them, but they had crossed paths on the way to their daughter's house. The husband ended up shooting himself in the head on her parents' doorstep. That call she made saved their lives. Suicidal calls are usually the worst. Most just want someone to talk to and ask for help, but there are others who have made up their mind and just want emergency services to find them before their family does. You try to keep them talking long enough, but it doesn't always work. Definitely calls from family who did find them are the worst. Saddest call was similar, but was a woman who stopped mid-call and asked me, "Do you really care about the people you talk to?" Hard to explain the tone in her voice, but it was really sad. I took a 911 call a few years back. It was a hysterical woman reporting that her son had just called her to let her know that he'd gotten into a fight with his ex and had thrown their 3-year-old son off a bridge. I've been doing this for 15 years and counting, and that call still haunts me. I'm not a 112 operator, but my uncle is, and this is a story he told us. A little girl crying and saying that her dad was beating her mom. She was only 8 years old, and yet she knew to call the authorities. At some point a man yelled, "What are you doing? Give me the phone," and she started screaming. By the time the police arrived, the mother and the daughter had been killed, and the father hanged himself. As an AT&T operator, I had a father call while his son was a couple hours from dying due to a motorcycle accident, and they asked me how video calling worked so that his mother stationed in Iraq could say goodbye. I took the rest of the day off. My sister used to be one. She told the worst thing was hearing someone die on the phone. There had been a serious car crash, and the lady who called was severely injured herself. My sister tried to keep her talking until the ambulance arrived, but at some point the woman fell quiet. Later heard that she had died on spot.